The sky over Oakhaven wasn't blue. It was a bruised, sickly purple, permanently choked by a fallout of gray flakes that drifted down like a constant, silent funeral. They called it the Great Charring. But what happened 10 years ago wasn't just a fire. Oakhaven didn't just burn, it disintegrated. It was erased. Elias felt the jolt of the bus coming to a halt. The doors hissed open, releasing him into the gray world. He stepped down, and his boots didn't crunch on gravel or dirt. They crunched on bone-white soot, a fine, powdery substance that covered everything in a thick blanket. He was here for a single purpose: to claim what was left of his father's workshop, a place he hadn't seen since he was a boy, since before the charring. As he walked, the ash clung to his damp skin like 1,000 tiny gray leeches. The air was heavy, humid, and every breath felt like inhaling dust. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft crunch of his own footsteps. He passed skeletal remains of houses, their frames reaching up like desperate, charred fingers pleading with the purple sky. There were no birds, no insects, not even the whisper of the wind. Oakhaven was a tomb. His family's old home was gone, just a blackened foundation filled with the same gray dust. But the workshop, his father's sanctuary, had been built with a deep, reinforced cellar. That was his destination. He found the slanted cellar doors, warped by heat but still intact. He pulled them open, the hinges groaning in protest. A wave of stale, thick air washed over him, a smell of old fires and something else. Something metallic and vaguely sweet. He clicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting a sharp cone through the darkness. The stairs were steep, leading down into the earth. The air grew thicker with every step, so dense he felt he could almost chew it. The beam of his light danced across the cellar. Everything was coated in a layer of ash, but otherwise, it was eerily preserved. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in tools that now looked like ancient relics. Shelves were filled with jars of all sizes, each neatly labeled in his father's precise handwriting. Nails, screws, fuses. And then he saw it, sitting alone on the main workbench, almost as if it had been placed there for him, was a single, large glass jar. The label on it was simple, written in the same familiar script. Mother Elias felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. His mother had died in the Great Charring, along with everyone else. He had assumed she was just gone, lost to the flames, like the rest of the town. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the cool glass. Why would his father keep her ashes? And why label it so plainly, so coldly? A sudden surge of grief and anger welled up inside him. With a frustrated cry, he swiped at the jar, sending it crashing to the floor. It shattered and a puff of gray dust billowed out. But that wasn't all that spilled onto the dusty concrete. Amidst the ash, something else landed with a soft, fleshy thud. Elias leaned closer, his flashlight beam trembling. It was a finger, a human finger, perfectly preserved, its skin as black as obsidian. He nudged it with the toe of his boot. It wasn't cold, it wasn't even room temperature. It was warm, a deep, unsettling warmth that seemed to radiate from within. As he stared at the impossible object, a sudden change occurred. The ever-present, silent drift of gray flakes from the sky outside stopped. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy, watchful. It was louder than a scream. Then, a sound. A dry, scraping sound. He jerked his head up, scanning the dark corners of the cellar. The piles of ash, the deep drifts against the walls, were moving. They weren't rising like ghosts or swirling like smoke. They were crawling, shifting and coalescing like millions of tiny insects. From the compressed soot and dust, forms began to take shape. They were limbless, faceless things, writhing masses of pure hate and memory. They were the people of Oakhaven. You're late for the hearth. Elias, a voice whispered. It was a dry, raspy sound, like sandpaper on bone. But it didn't come from the shifting shapes or the corners of the room. It came from inside his own lungs, echoing in the hollow of his chest. Panic seized him. He tried to turn, to run, to scramble back up the stairs into the gray daylight, but his feet wouldn't move. He looked down and saw them sinking into the floor. The concrete wasn't solid anymore. It had become a thick, viscous lake of cinders, pulling him down like quicksand. He struggled, thrashing wildly, but the more he fought, the deeper he sank. An intense heat began to rise from the floor, not the heat of a fire, but a dry, suffocating heat that baked the very air. He looked at his hands, holding them up in the beam of his drop flashlight. They were turning gray. His skin was flaking away, not burning, but simply detaching, dissolving into tiny motes of ash that floated up to join the stagnant air. In that final horrifying moment, Elias understood the truth of the great charring. Ocavan hadn't burned down. It wasn't a fire. It was a consumption. The town, and everyone in it, had been inhaled, breathed in by some ancient, hungry entity that dwelled beneath the soil. The town had become a part of its lungs, and now it was his turn to be breathed. He opened his mouth to scream, but only a cloud of gray dust escaped. There was no man, no body, no bones.